Curious to know what's going on with the men's shelter project, and she's got an incredible presentation. So Carla from Porchlight, Executive Director, are you ready to roll?
I am.
Good.
And Jason's being a rock star and putting up this presentation. So I asked Lynette from the city for some information, factual kind of stuff. So she shared, you can go to the next slide, Jason. So she shared her PowerPoint with me. It goes back a year, which is fine because I don't think in my mind, everybody's right here with me, but maybe not. So we're going to go back a year and kind of go through some information. So we're talking all things purpose-built men's shelter. And so this first slide, it talks about the city purchasing the Zaire Road location, which is over by East Town Mall, the old Savers building. They originally had wanted that for the permanent site. It was not accepted by the Common Council. And so then they bought it, and it's now being used as a temporary site. And we have moved in there. So I will give an update on all of that. And then they also bought the Bartlin Drive location, which is the old sports pub there on Stoughton Road. And so that will be the site of the actual purpose-built men's shelter, which basically just means purpose-built and that it's being built. There's nothing there, right? They burnt down the building and they will build us design-wise what we need there to run a shelter, which is fabulous. So this slide from November 2021, it talks about the money going into building that new site on Bartlin. It's now gone up to the city, the county, and the federal government are putting in, I think it's $21 million to build that. And of course, they're not even starting building it for a couple of years. And so knock on wood, we're all hoping that that doesn't go up another $5 million. So then in April, they put out the request for proposals for an architectural design team, which a group has been selected, and that's on the next slide. And then at the same time, the request for qualifications for the operator of the shelter, which Porchlight was selected for that. So you can go to the next slide there. And then at this same time, mostly like in May of this year, the city started the renovation of the Zaire Road facility. It needed a lot of work. It has been empty for a long time. There was mold issues, so they had to do mold remediation. I think originally it was going to be $500,600,000 to renovate it so that we could be there for 3 years. It came up over like $1.1 million to renovate it, but they did an awesome job. It looks fabulous. And if this group would like a tour, I'd be happy to give a tour, like an hour and a half before the shelter opens or something, or we can pick a time. I can reach out after the banquet. I can reach out with Jason and we can set something up if folks would like to see the Zaire Road shelter. The group that was selected as the architectural and design team is Dimension 4 out of Madison. And then they went in on a proposal with a group called Shopworks. And together they are going around getting a lot of feedback from different groups on what type of design is needed for the new permanent shelter. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. So Porchlight being selected as the operator, it went through, so everyone, sent in proposals to be looked at. The proposals went through the CDBG commission, the homeless needs issues committee, finance committee, and then eventually approved by the Common Council. And so all of that just happened at the end of October. You can go to the next slide. Here's a picture of the Zaire Road site. So it's on, there's obviously lots of parking. We have we call it the Beacon bus. The Beacon bus comes every day to the Beacon, just big school buses, 2 big school buses at 4:15 to pick up men from the Beacon, bring them to our shelter now at Zaire Road. We moved there October 13th, and we open up then at 5. But guests can park there can, you know, drive there too, or they can walk there. And then of course staff need to park. And so that's the site there. That's how close we are to other people and other businesses. All right, next slide. This shows the setup at Zaire Road. It is smaller than First Street. And it's crazy because when we were first there and it's empty, it just seems like this huge location. And then you put all the stuff in it and it's just like, wow, it is smaller. So I think First Street was 37,000 square feet. And this is like 31,000 square feet, something like that. But yeah, like I said, the city, you know, asked our input on what we needed. On the right there are all the cots. There are cots for 150 people, which is not enough. And we knew that kind of for building code reasons, they needed it to be 150, or they would have to put in way more bathrooms and showers, of which there just wasn't the space to do so. And so what we have done, which isn't showed on this beginning slide here, is along the wall on the right, they took some cots and made them bunks to get us up to, I think, 208. And so nobody really likes the bunks, but what we did as incentive along that wall are plugins. And so there are folks who just need things to plug in. And so then they will want to be over there. So we're only using those as we need them. But, you know, the other night we had 203. So it's not like we're not going to get below 150. And so some things that we didn't have at First Street that we now have that we're super excited about, lockers. We're finally looking at, you know, we've been talking about lockers in Madison forever for homeless folks, but never really had a place to put them or a group who wanted to be in charge of them. So the city purchased and installed 150 lockers in the space that's number 2 on the bottom there. So people come in where it says number 1, and then right away to the right is lockers. So they'll put stuff in their lockers right away, and that's just overnight use. And you know, it's like a lock where we can tell them how to get in, and then the next day we can change it to something else type situation. So it's just to keep their stuff safe overnight. And then in the morning when they leave and get back on the Beacon bus, they'll just take their stuff back out. There are 3 big rooms called the recovery room, the isolation room, and the quarantine room. So we've had a recovery room since we left Grace Church when going to then Warner Park, First Street, now Zaire. And the require room has about 20 cots in it. It's just a smaller space for folks who maybe have severe mental health issues and are not having a good day, or are experiencing symptoms, or somebody who's a little overly intoxicated and just needs to be away from the larger population of folks. So we put them in that smaller space. So through all of the pandemic, the city and the county have been putting different groups into hotels. The biggest group, we call the vulnerable population, anybody 65 or older and folks with severe health issues, that ended September 30th. So any of those folks who didn't find housing and who still need shelter, they are now coming to our shelter, and of course, who are men. And then the other hotel group is the medical respite hotel, and that's for folks who are COVID positive, have COVID symptoms, or have been contact traced. And that was extended through the end of February. So we are still doing our nightly health assessments and sending folks to that hotel, but it will end at the end of February. So then we have our isolation and quarantine room to put those folks away from the larger population. The obvious situation being at 8 in the morning, those folks are just leaving on the bus with everybody else, right? So nobody has solved that, right? I can quarantine them at night and then I'm sending them out with the rest of the world. But unfortunately, all of these extra things have been paid for through Federal CARES Act funds, and that is now gone. And the hotels were quite millions and millions of dollars, quite expensive. So unlike First Street, where we had the showers and bathrooms on the trailers, which were cool and, creative by the city staff, we now have, they built us bathrooms, individual showers, handicap accessible things, and bathroom for the staff. So things are really built in this space. We will be there for 3 years, and so they did a great job. Next slide. So this is just a quick timeline of which we're in, them getting the Zaire Road ready. We moved October 13th. We left First Street October 13th at 8 in the morning, and we were set up and good to go October 13th at 4 o'clock. So our staff were amazing. The next slide shows the Bartolin Drive site for the permanent site. You can see the big Stoughton Road there on your left in this site. The McDonald's there, if you're looking at it wonky, kind of to the left of it, that is also closed down. Like McDonald's is no longer open. And I think they're hoping to be able to acquire that space. It's a little farther out than say First Street, but either way, even First Street, we had to bus people. So I'm either busing them 4 miles or I'm busing them 6 miles. It is what it is. All right, the next slide. So that kind of looks at the schedule of Bartolin. So right now in the next slides, talk about that, all the engagements that's happening with Design 4 and ShopWorks, like that's been going on, will continue to go on. That kind of gets us through, and I think it's not until construction looks like the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. So the actual, shovel in the ground doesn't happen for a whole nother year. Okay, the next slide talks about all that engagement that the city is doing and that the design company is doing and that ShopWorks are doing. They are going around and looking at current programs that serve the homeless. The Beacon, they were at Zaire Road yesterday. They went and looked at First Street. I gave them a tour of Grace Church yesterday. Like they want to see kind of where we started from, what were the challenges, what worked, what didn't work, and what we need for the future. All right, the next slide. They are doing a survey that all these current programs can fill out, that folks who are utilizing the services can fill out, neighbors can fill out. They really want as much input as possible. They've designated 2 city staff to go around to the different, to go around to our shelter and to the Beacon, and to literally help people, to talk to homeless persons, anybody who's not able to fill out the survey, to talk to them face to face. What works, what doesn't work, what do you want to see in the new facility? So I really think they're doing a great job with that. All right, next one. This is that survey. Anybody can fill out the survey. That's the link down there. If you can't, super fast, write it down. Just, email me your name and I can get the survey link sent to you. All right, the next slide. This shows, and they've already done it all, like super fast. Dimension 4 and ShopWorks went around on the 24th and the 25th. Like I said, they went and looked at the Bartolin site. They were at the Beacon. They went to Dairy Drive, which is the 30 tiny shelters, I call them, and talk to the folks there. It's really important to talk to that group that, if it wasn't for these little tiny shelters or the tiny homes, would be sleeping outside, that chose not to come into the shelter, because we want to build this new shelter that people are going to say yes to and not turn it down. And so it's really important to get their input. They're going to different libraries. Like I said, they went to Grace. And then yesterday they went to the men's shelter on Zaire and sat down and had a meal with folks and talked with them, which I think was very important. And then we're having a meeting in a couple of weeks with the city staff to get all of that feedback. Okay, next slide. This talks about different virtual groups that they're doing with people who provide services in the community to our population. So behavioral health, mental health, physical health folks, other people from the Homeless Services Consortium who want to give input. And then just their thank you slide. So we can get rid of that and come back to real person. I wanted to talk briefly about folks who we are partnering with. I just commented with Peggy and Jason before we started that when Porchlight put in our application to be the operator of the shelter, we've really asked anybody else who might have the idea they could run this on their own to partner with us. Because it takes all of us, right? Like we have a specialty, everybody else has a specialty. There's no reason we don't need to do everything, right? And the Beacon kind of runs on that model, and that's going very well. So our largest partner for the new Bartlett site is Catalyst for Change, that does an amazing job on street outreach. So they're going to continue to do outreach. So we have intake at the shelter from 5 to 8:30, meaning that's when you need to come into the shelter. No questions asked, you just get in. If you come after that, you need to be either escorted by the police, have a hospital note that you just got discharged, or have previously called that you're working and you're coming in at 2 a.m. or something like that. Or we currently are partnering with Catalyst for Change. Like if they can get somebody to finally get off the streets that has been there for a year and they can only do it at 10 o'clock at night, they call ahead, talk to Ferris, the manager, and just say, I finally got Johnny, we're coming in, let's make this work, right? Like we're trying not to have barriers. So once we open, we're going to be partnering with Catalyst to do that permanent housing work. Like we want the new shelter to not just be shelter, but really focusing on moving folks into permanent housing. And so we're going to be partnering with them to do that. I think we put in that Porchlight will no longer be doing case management. Like right now we have 2 case managers at night, that those funds would then be used to pay the Catalyst staff to move people into permanent housing. We talked about WisCares, which works with the folks who are homeless and low income and their pets. Back when folks were sleeping at Rhinedale Park, outreach workers went in there and asked them, why aren't you sleeping in the shelters? Like, what are the barriers? The biggest ones were there's not a shelter for couples. So the new shelter will look at how can we serve couples. There's nothing for pets. Obviously, if somebody has a service animal, we would accept them, but there's not a place to do with your pets. And when you see homeless folks out on the streets, many of them have dogs. Do we have the magical answer for that? No, there's plenty of cons as to why that won't work. But we met with WisCares and they had a lot of great ideas. They said they had crates for us. They'd be happy to help us brainstorm around this. Like, we want to start with, these are the needs. Let's say yes, and let's talk to the experts and let's figure this out. And then the third one was, we don't want to follow any rules. That one, I'm really stuck on that one, right? Like, we got rid of the barrier of 90 nights in the year that you could stay there. You can now come every night, and I'm hoping to never have to go back to 90 nights. It was based on funding that we were getting from the state shelter subsidy money. They said if anything more than 90 days is housing, so you don't get shelter money. They changed that temporarily over the pandemic, right? We didn't want folks out on the streets during a pandemic, so we're hoping that they continue to give us those funds. We used to breathalyze people during the summer. We no longer do that. You can come in intoxicated or under the influence, as long as you're not causing big trouble for the rest of the group, right? But you can't just sit on your cot and drink or smoke something. So that group, I don't know what to do with that. What the mayor would like us to do in 3 years, which we're trying to figure out, is have a space in the permanent shelter where somebody who might get suspended would then not be suspended outside, but be suspended in place. So we have 3 years to figure that out. We moved on October 13th. it's going well. Everyone loves the space. The city did an amazing job. The police are not thrilled with the number of police calls. You know, we're new to this area. All of our neighbors are on high alert. You know, you can't just come to the shelter between 5 and 8 and walk around, you know, outside or whatever. Like, we have control of you between 5 and 8 in the morning, but then we don't, right? We're not a 24-hour shelter. So neighbors are not excited about people walking into their space between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. So we're not sure how to figure out that, but we're meeting with, you know, everybody had a tour. The police had a tour, the fire department had a tour, everybody and their brother had a tour. We had open houses for neighbors. And so we're meeting again with the police on the 8th to see how we can call less often. Part of it is people have a lot of health issues. And, you know, we call the police for ambulances quite a bit, but I kind of have a feeling that's not what they're talking about. So we'll find out what they're talking about and see how we can solve it. But yeah, the guests love the space. In fact, what Ferris said they were saying was that we really feel like people care about us because it was so nice, you know, when they weren't just shoved in a big, huge warehouse building. Like, it really is accommodating. We have a big, long strip with tons and tons of places where they can plug in their phone. Like, what would you do if you couldn't plug in your phone? Everybody needs a phone. And so just little things like that made them feel loved. So happy to be there. A lot of information. Who has questions?
It is a lot of great info. If you have questions, let's go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. Anybody? I've got a couple, but if anyone else has one, please go. All right, I will start. So you mentioned that you had 207 folks recently, 150 beds, but 203 with bunks. Where do the balance of those folks go? I mean, you have to turn them away, and
we never, ever turn anybody away for capacity issues, right? We will put mats on the floor before we do that, which is not what the fire department wants to hear, but they also don't want people to freeze to death. So no, we don't ever turn anybody away for capacity issues.
Oh, that's good to know. I wasn't aware of that. That's great. My other question was related to that McDonald's. What do you think? So if the city buys it, what do you think they may use that for? I mean,
well, I would love to see some housing attached to all of this. Like, wouldn't, you know, so they're talking about pay to stay, which they do in Minneapolis and St. Paul, which will only work if we're a 24-hour shelter, which is what the mayor wants, but that will triple our price tag of operations. So pay as you stay is workers can be there during the day. You know, if you work second and third shift, you can sleep all day. You pay $7 a week to have that spot for you. You know, $3 goes to the operator, $4 gets saved up for your first month's rent and security deposit.
oh, wow.
And that is not housing. That is, you're there for a few months until you get saved up to be able to move into housing. But there's just not, as you know, there's just not enough housing for people. You know, as everybody knows, I'm a straight shooter and I tell it like it is. The two things I'm talking about, who's paying for this, right? Like right now, the operating cost of the shelter is $2.4 million. And I'm providing shelter with a little bit extra, right? So people, the community want mental health services, alcohol and drug services, employment services, permanent housing. People want a lot. And in 24-hour services, which is fine. We'd be happy to do that. That is all coming at a huge price tag. And then housing, right? So right now I have case managers who work in the evening with folks. And several months ago, I said, what's a barrier as to why you can't get these guys into housing? The money we get to have for operations cannot be used for first month's rent and security deposit. So I wrote a grant and got $10,000 to be used for that. And I just said, until it's gone, we'll pay for everybody's first month's rent and security deposit. 3 times they've utilized it because people can't find housing. Like, it was a barrier for a small number of people. They've got people who have money and just can't find a landlord who will either accept them, or it's not enough money to move into an efficiency or one bedroom in Madison that's not attached to a program. So our 102 units at Brook Street, which are single rooms, just like a dorm, we have a year waiting list for men. It's permanent housing. Rent is $300. Nobody's going anywhere. Like, we have an opening when somebody dies because everybody's, you know, older and not in good health. So I would love it if we could have some actual housing there, even if it was just transitional housing. I could move workers out and let them stay for a year and move them out. I don't know. Throwing out ideas.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, I don't know of any, and maybe Jason does, but I don't know of any groups in the area that would buy that and, you know, turn it in if the city just, you know, couldn't afford it or chose not to. But
well, I think you could, I mean, you could see, we are seeing a, I wouldn't call it a pattern, but there's a couple of locations downtown, a nonprofit, a faith-based, or a community-driven nonprofit, or the city-owned land. I mean, that changes the financial stack of the deal, and it can make creating affordable housing more approachable. And you, St. John's Lutheran is obviously the example, but we're seeing the neighborhood house with the same thing on the near west side of downtown, who's looking to do the same thing, and they have an RFP out now. They own the land, and it changes the dip, it changes it. You know, Carla and I were on a tour of it's Catholic Charities, but I can't remember the name of the facility in St. Paul, drawing a blank. But, you know, they had housing directly across the street, like multiple buildings, and it was one whole area. And it really worked very smoothly. We have the housing crisis in downtown right now is worse than I think most people recognize. There's only a handful of apartment units available downtown. I mean, Emily's team and I have been talking extensively about what's happening with students right there, touching up against 50,000 students. So this is a crisis overall in the market, let alone for people that just need to find how they can't find housing, even if they have the means to find housing. That's another level to this problem that maybe we haven't seen in the past. And there is a lot of supply being built, but it's not getting built. It can't get built fast enough. And then there's not enough of the intentional supply of what Carla is talking about. So I think it'd be great if they did something with that area. You know, they land banking, the city's land banking, the city's also, squirreling away money to do projects like this. So potentially, Carla, that could be a site for that. And groups like us should be advocating.
Mm-hmm. So I got my first phone call yesterday from somebody at UW-Madison who said, and I just, we're short staffed, so I'm answering phones. Do you have any recommendations for college students who are homeless during the summer, right? I don't know, they're in the dorms or they're in housing and I literally was just like, no. I'm like, seriously? I'm sorry, yes, that is a need, but come on. You're calling a homeless organization? Like, I get it, right? Where are they supposed to be? But I had nothing. I'm like, Craigslist? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about that. My last question is, I know, I guess it piggybacks off the last one, but I know there's organizations, Catalyst for Change and Tellurian, and a number of them that buy buildings for affordable housing. But is it a bad idea to look at that McDonald's space, maybe some housing, but also what I'm hearing you say is like there is nowhere for folks to go, like an activity center, which I know is really probably a bad idea. But in the winter months, where do they go? And is there a place for them to go and just do activities, whether it's crafts or just keep busy?
Sure. Somehow they have to figure out this operating cost thing. So, if all of this stuff works, is better if we can be a 24-hour facility, right? I don't know what happens to the Beacon site, but whatever, this is 2025. Those things can all happen in a 24-hour facility, right? Like, it wouldn't need to happen if we could build something next door, we would just be a 24-hour facility. Yeah, I would love to see, I mean, Porchlight does housing, right? Like if the city owned it, if somehow, because we're a nonprofit, we could build something there, we could just be like, next, move in. I assume the city owns it, but when you look at the Zaire Road map, it's not, I don't know that the city owns that little spot. I will ask them the next time I talk to them. Or, you know, owns the McDonald's space.
Yeah.
My guess is it's still privately owned, but I'm also guessing that the city is looking at that site. The city likes to aggregate property together, but I mean, there's smart property owners. So I'll check in. I can check in with Matt Wachter and the team to see.
Good. Any other questions from anyone?
I have a question for Carla. So you said that you're short-staffed now, and then you're looking at this, operating the space as well. So what does that mean for Porchlight in terms of recruitment? What are you going to have to do from a staffing standpoint? And are you seeing challenges right now? I mean, I know we are seeing challenges in attracting people, and the increased wage market is, great, but it's also hard to just turn on a dime and to be able to be competitive. So what are your challenges around there?
Yeah. I don't know that our challenges are any different than anybody else's. Like we have a position at the shelter that's 5 a.m. until 8:30 a.m. Who the heck wants to work at the shelter from 5 a.m. till 8:30 a.m. for $15 an hour? Like I'm surprised anybody works that. So we are raising wages starting January 1st for some of those key entry level positions. We have to get above Quick Trip. And I say that jokingly, but no, why would you work for the shelter when you could work at Quick Trip and make $15.50 an hour? So we're raising between $17 and $18.50 some of those key entry level positions. The problem we have is we're still attracting people, but they don't stick around. Like they come because they want to be help. They want to, they have this mission. Like we just had a case manager quit because she couldn't afford to live here. I'm like, well, didn't you know that when you took the job? Like, 2 months later, could she have more money? No, that doesn't work that way. So yeah, like everybody else, we are having to increase wages. But because we're so large, like, housing initiatives, Catalyst for Change, they're all out there doing amazing work. They are much smaller. We are a staff of like 80. Housing initiatives just advertise a case manager position for like $24 an hour. I have managers who don't make $24 an hour. We just can't compete with that. Just because inflation is going up, it doesn't necessarily mean the city is giving us more money to pay my case managers, right? Or people are donating more so that I can pay people. Like I would love to have everybody make starting wage X, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're getting those funds. We're not doing things that generate, that we're not generating income, right? Our goal is that we can just pay the bills. So yeah, we're struggling kind of like everybody else is out there struggling.
Yeah, it's hard with inflation that's just going up so fast. And even, for us, we've had good audiences, but our heating and air conditioning utilities are triple what they were this time last year. So it just
right.
Yeah.
We do hire a lot from within. Like I would say probably half of the people who work at the shelter are former guests of the shelter, and it has been very successful. I have current staff of the shelter who are sleeping at the shelter and working. Like they come in and they work their 4 to 9 shift or their 5 to 2 in the morning shift and then jump on their cot. And they're good workers and they're empathetic and they know what people need. Now I just need to be able to house them, because of fair housing. It's not like back in the day when I could just be like, hey, Preston, manager of the shelter, tell me some guys who are working hard and I'll move them into our Broome Street location. I can't do that anymore for obvious reasons. So what I'm working on is I would love to be able to acquire some housing or convince the city to let me take some of our housing that we have and not take from the coordinated entry list to be able to house my shelter workers. to start with them, and then other guys who are working. Something, I got to be able to do something creative to reduce those numbers, because I'm sorry, it's not cold yet, right? If I'm seeing
Right.
207, and that was the beginning of October. I think it was rainy, it's gonna get bad. So I'm working on it.
Thank you for working on it.
Awesome. Well, good. Carla, again, thanks for the presentation. Thanks for everything you do. Really appreciate it. I'm excited about this new location. I think there's just a lot of potential, and I love the fact that the public, the users, folks, it's all skate. Everybody's opinion is in, and I really think those are the most important projects when you do that.